In this episode, we're going to take another look at how you can take your dialogue audio recordings, whether it's for a podcast or for your video, and make it loud, the appropriate loudness for whatever platform you're going to upload your content to. So for example, if you're doing a video and you're uploading it to YouTube, YouTube allows you to upload audio as loud as -14 LUFS. But the problem is that to achieve that loudness, you usually have to come in and take care of transients like this, little peaks that are sticking up in the way. You have to compress those down, or you have to reduce your overall dynamic range to achieve that loudness level. In other words, you need to pull this down so that I can boost the overall levels up. The problem is, if you do heavy compression like that, and sometimes you have to do quite a bit of it, it starts to sound very kind of strange and in your face in a not very natural way. It doesn't sound great. So one of the things that we explored a few weeks ago was using a dialogue leveler to level things out so you didn't have to do as much compression. And what a leveler does, it essentially turns down these louder bits without affecting the quieter bits. And then you can boost it all up together. Sounds a little bit more natural, less compressed, less processed. But this is another way to do that. And we're going to use a different plugin this time. This is one that I don't have any sort of affiliation with, from a company called Noiseworks. It is a plugin called DynAssist. This is not a free plugin. This is a $150 plugin, but let me explain what makes it kind of special in my mind. I'm just evaluating it at this point. I haven't purchased it yet. But it has a few things. Number one, it has a vocal writer. This is very similar to a leveler. It's essentially a leveler. And what's nice about this one is I can tell it what loudness I want to target. Great, that's awesome, in LUFS, because that's what we're targeting for YouTube, for example. We also, let me go ahead and put that back to, I think its default was about 50 here. We'll put this at its default of 1.5. I think that's about the default. We also have a noise gate. In essence, this is an AI-enabled noise gate, so it will identify between phrases and it will attenuate the overall audio level between them. The problem you have when you boost your audio levels is that the breaths also get boosted, and it sounds really yucky. And this breath module will actually identify those breaths and reduce those as well. And in this case here, it's going to reduce them as much as 12 dB to kind of keep it sounding fairly natural, but also making sure the breaths are not super prominent and sticking out. And then also, when you do this sort of leveling and compression, sibilance can start to be a problem as well. That's the sizzling sound that can be very, very grating that you hear when people say the letter S or C, or sometimes other letters as well. So in this case, we're going to allow it to attenuate that, reduce the sibilance by up to 6 dB in essence. So the way this works, I am in DaVinci Resolve Fairlight, and I have inserted the DynAssist plugin over here. Now, there was another thing that was kind of bothering me. There were a lot of mouth noises, really yucky saliva and mouth clicking things. So I've already inserted in front of the DynAssist plugin this RX10 or 11 mouth declick. So that's just going to take care of some of that mouth clickiness that you didn't want to hear anyway. And then I've got the DynAssist after that. So the way this works is I need to essentially record it, teach DynAssist, just play the audio that it's going to process ahead of time. And you have to do this because DynAssist needs the ability to see what the audio is going to do before it does it. And the reason it needs to do that is it's essentially like a look ahead. It's enabling the plugin to be able to react instantaneously. And it does that by actually playing, capturing the audio ahead of time. So I'm going to press this record button, and I'm going to play it. And while we're playing it here, you're going to get to hear the original raw audio. It sounds like this. Mr. Sherlock Holmes, who was usually very late in the morning, save upon those not infrequent occasions when he was up all night, was seated at the breakfast table. I stood upon the hearth rug and picked up the stick which our visitor had left behind him the night before. It was a fine, thick piece of wood, bulbous-headed, of the sort which is known as a Penang lawyer. Just under the head was a silver band nearly an inch across, "To James Mortimer, MRCS, from his friends of the CCH," was engraved upon it, with the date 1884. It was just such a stick as the old-fashioned family practitioner used to carry, dignified, solid, and reassuring. Okay, go ahead and let it analyze that. And you can see it's already written some automation points to overall boost the levels, but also to attenuate or reduce the breaths right here. And in some cases, even between phrases, it's dropping the levels even more. So that's how it works. Now, the idea here is I can go ahead and let this run. It's now written, essentially, it has that automation applied to the track as we play it again the next time, which is super nice. Now, the thing is, let's go ahead and play this back so you can hear it. I've just essentially used the default settings here. And let's reset our loudness meter so we can see how it did in terms of achieving our target of minus 19 LUFS. And here we go. This is what it sounds like with the plugin activated. Mr. Sherlock Holmes, who was usually very late in the morning, save upon those not infrequent occasions when he was up all night, was seated at the breakfast table. I stood upon the hearth rug and picked up the stick which our visitor had left behind him the night before. It was a fine, thick piece of wood, bulbous-headed, of the sort which is known as a Penang lawyer. Just under the head was a silver band nearly an inch across, "To James Mortimer, MRCS, from his friends of the CCH," was engraved upon it, with the date 1884. It was just such a stick as the old-fashioned family practitioner used to carry, dignified, solid, and reassuring. Okay, so it did some things, although not everything exactly how I would normally have done it, but it did a pretty good job. I was especially impressed. Obviously, we nearly achieved, or very, very close to our overall target, close enough. And it also left 3.3 dB of true peak headroom, which is really good. One of the things that I think a lot of people don't realize is that you have to retain in your original audio, you have to retain some headroom, about minus 1.5 to minus 2 dB true peak, so that when you export your video, and along with the audio, that the audio doesn't end up clipping in the exported file. Because what happens is when it compresses down the overall video and audio footage to make a shorter or smaller file, like file compression, it actually you'll lose some of that headroom. So you need to leave at least minus 1.5 to minus 2 dB true peak. And in this case, it was able to achieve that because we have this avoid clipping true peak turned on. Now, I'm not going to cover this so much, maybe go in depth in another video, but the breaths were pretty good, but not perfect. It actually missed one over here, and we'll go fix that in just a second. And I think it did a pretty nice job on the overall sibilance. But if we found that it didn't catch all of one of the breaths like it did here, we can actually come in and edit that. And what I can do is just zoom in here. I'm just using my scroll wheel or on a touchpad, just doing the kind of the 2-finger zoom. And I can click this edit right here, and it allows me to actually change some of these control points here. So I can move this and say, hey, you didn't catch all of this breath. Let's come and catch that breath. Attenuate it at the start of the breath so it sounds a bit more natural. I just close it here, and we can move our playhead so that we can play that again. Let's go ahead and play and hear how it sounds now. 1884. It was just much better. So that's all we have to do. We are now done, and that is a really, really convenient way to be able to achieve your loudness target, manage your breaths, and also take care of any sibilance all in one go. Is it worth $150? That's a question only you can answer for yourself. I think I'm probably going to buy it because that was a pretty quick way to get to where we wanted to be. And it did a really pretty nice job. I just had to go in and fix one little spot where it was a little late catching a breath. So if it's useful to you, hopefully that was helpful. Again, I don't have any sort of affiliation with that company. And get out there, make some great sound. We'll talk to you again soon.